This webinar is being co-hosted by the Maryland Cybersecurity Council, which was created by the General Assembly, and by law, the Maryland Attorney General is the chair of this council. Given this pandemic, many of us are online more than ever, working from home, our children are learning from home, and unfortunately, cyber criminals are online too, seeking to benefit from this crisis. We're fortunate to have our presenters today to discuss the current scams and ways to protect ourselves from these cyber criminals. Our presenters today are Maryland's Attorney General Brian Frosh, who works to ensure the fairness, equality, and justice for all Marylanders. We also have Joseph Kerrigan with us today, who is a senior security engineer with the Johns Hopkins University's Information Security Institute. Joe is also the co-host of the Hacking Humans podcast. Thank you both for being with us today and sharing your expertise. We will start with the Maryland Attorney General Brian Frosh, and then we will go with Joe, and then we will do questions at the end. So at this turn, I'll turn it over to you, Brian, to go over your presentation.
Thank you very much, Sue. I appreciate the invitation, and I thank you for the great work that the Cash Campaign does for Maryland families all over our state. And it's a special honor to share the virtual stage with Joe Kerrigan, who is a true expert on these subjects. If you go to the first slide, Sue, the subject of this webinar is that cyber criminals are looking for you, and they absolutely are. There are folks whose full-time job it is to steal your money. They're on the phone, on their computers, 8 hours a day, 12 hours a day, just looking to steal money from innocent folks who are looking for help. But two things. One, we have a consumer protection division that focuses on these kinds of crimes, these kinds of frauds and scams all the time. We probably get 30 to 40,000 calls a year from Maryland consumers who have been cheated, ripped off, had their money stolen. And we are able to recover $10 to $15 million a year for those folks. You'll see on this slide the contact information for our office and for our consumer division in particular. The phone number for our office is 410-576-6300. And you can email our consumer division directly at consumer@oag.state.md.us. If you go to the next slide, please. And let's go to the fourth slide. What we're going to talk about today are cyber scams in general, and in particular, those that relate to the COVID-19 crisis that we are in at this very moment. But you should understand in general that you did not win the lottery in Ireland. That nice man from Nigeria is not going to deposit $1 million in your bank account. And your grandson doesn't need you to send money in gift cards, Bitcoin, or anything else to somebody to get him out of jail in Mexico. These are all common scams. They don't relate in particular to the virus that's afflicting our society today, but they are the kinds of things that are happening every day, repeatedly, to Marylanders and to folks all over the nation and all over the world. If you go to the next slide, please. One of the two of the main vehicles that people use are spoofing and phishing. In spoofing, you'll see when you pick up your telephone, it looks like a call from next door, looks like a call from a business that you know and like, maybe a call from a charity. But in fact, what's going on is one of these cyber criminals is using a fake phone number. They spoof the phone number and make it look like it's somebody you know, somebody you trust, or a number that you trust. They do that so that you'll pick up the phone. And they do that so that they can engage you in conversation and try to get you to send them money. There is one, I guess, two rules. One, if you don't recognize the number, don't pick up. Let them leave a message. You can call them back. And number two, you get on the phone with somebody you don't know, hang up. It's not a good thing. Just hang up. That's the simplest way to deal with it. The second category here is called phishing. And these are emails from sites that you may think you recognize, or at least they look trustworthy. And they may look like they're coming from the government, from individuals that you think you know, banks, charities, schools, and they may spoof the email address of a business that you think you're familiar with, or a charity you think you're familiar with. Be very careful with these emails. They're looking for your personal information. They're looking to get into your computer and insert malware, comb through your files, and whatever you do, don't open attachments. Don't click on the links that they have. You can very frequently identify the email sender as a phony because it may say it's coming from Verizon. I think I got one yesterday that looked like it was coming from a hardware store. I was going to get a gift card from them. But when I looked at the actual address of the person who was sending it, it wasn't coming from that store. It wasn't coming from that company. It had a complicated email address, but it wasn't coming from the folks they were purporting to represent. Let's go to the next slide. We're seeing an explosion of scams and ripoffs that relate to the crisis that we're in right now. And this often happens. The predators take advantage of our needs, our fears, our desires, and the COVID-19 crisis is just perfect for them. And let's go to the next slide. There are people who are entitled to money from the federal government under the CARES Act. They are either going to get a direct deposit to their bank account, or they're going to receive a check for $1,200 or $1,700. There have to date been tens of thousands of complaints of phishing or fraud schemes from people who are trying to steal that money. You should understand that the money that's coming to you is not subject to anything you have to tell somebody who purports to be from the government. They don't need to know your social security number. So if you get a call saying, I'm going to expedite your check, just tell me your social security number, your birth date, something like that. That's a fraud. Hang up on them. The FBI and the Department of Homeland Security have identified literally tens of thousands of COVID-related malicious domains, and they are trying to steal your money. You will not have to pay a $15 or $50 charge to expedite your check or your electronic deposit. That's all phony. Let's go to the next slide, please. So you'll actually, this is what I was just talking about. If you are concerned, have questions, you can go to the IRS website. It's www.irs.gov/coronavirus. That website can answer any questions that you may have, but I can assure you that nobody from the Treasury, the IRS, is going to contact you by phone or by email about your stimulus check. Similarly, if you're a small business, and you get an unsolicited contact from someone claiming to be with the Small Business Administration, that's a fraud as well. Let's go to the next slide. This is a great time for fraudulent charitable solicitations. Everybody wants to help their neighbors, their community, and there are folks who are out there to take advantage of your instinct to be generous. There is a website called Charity Navigator that does a very good job of analyzing charities. And so if you receive a solicitation and you have any questions whatsoever about that charitable organization, you can check it out on Charity Navigator's website. Check to make sure they're a registered public 501c3 organization with an identification registered with Charity Navigator. You can, if you're on the phone with somebody and they're trying to get you to make a contribution to a charity, ask them what the charity's mission is, what its goals are, what its history of success is. You may find that the person on the phone with you is unable to answer those questions. That's a good indicator that it's a fraud. I would say for the most part, don't talk to people on the phone about contributions. Hang up. You can call their number if you want to give to the American Lung Association. Look up their number, call them, or look them up online and contribute online. Similarly, the Charity Navigator website will also tell you how this charity does. There's some charities that spend 90% of their money on the charitable purposes and only 10% on administration. And there are others that have the reverse statistics. They spend 90% on themselves on telemarketing and only a small fraction on the actual charitable work that they're purporting to support. Let's go to the next slide. So another topic now during the coronavirus crisis are cures. People will tell you that you can buy a cure for the coronavirus online, over the phone, whatever. This is a total scam. There are no cures yet. We hope there will be. There are reports of research that's going on that may yield cures. There is no cure now. Similarly, there are no FDA-approved tests that you can administer to yourself for the COVID-19 virus. Again, there may be some soon, but there are not now. And again, the contact information for our office, I gave you our general office number before. Our consumer hotline number is 410-528-8662. And again, our email is up there. Let's go to the next slide. This is also a time where folks who have resources and are thinking about investing are besieged by scammers. Everybody should be concerned about a pitch that guarantees you're going to buy low and sell high during this recovery. That's people who are making those promises are completely unable to fulfill them. People are going to be hawking gold, silver, and commodities. Those are very speculative investments, not necessarily a bad investment, but you really need to trust the person that you're talking to, and you need to understand you can lose a lot of money investing in those commodities. Scammers will use this crisis to capitalize on the unemployment rate to offer get-rich schemes. They will tell you you can earn thousands of dollars at home on a daily basis. Those are mostly frauds. Be very, very careful about getting involved with any of those types of pyramid schemes or get-rich-quick schemes. Similarly, when folks are saying to you, listen, you got to get out of the stock market right now. I've got an annuity or I've got some other investment that you should put your money in. That again is very speculative. That they often charge very high fees and put you in products that really are no better than what you're in at the moment. Make sure you're careful before you take your investments, dump them, and put them in something else. This is a dangerous time to be switching back and forth. And similarly, real estate schemes can also be very speculative, pose significant risks. Market changes can have a huge and negative impact on the performance of those types of investments. And if we go to the next slide, I wanted to give you information about where you can contact the federal offices that are looking at this stuff, that are protecting us from these frauds and schemes. And you can see that under the FBI has an operation that's running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's called CyWatch. Its phone number is 855-292-3937. And you can email them at cywatch@ic.fbi.gov. And the Cyber Task Force has 56 field offices. Its website is up there, same for their internet complaint center. Another website or email address for the Department of Homeland Security's strategic targeted outreach programs. Those are, if you think you're the victim of a fraud, those are great places to be in touch with and to report these crimes. You can call our office, you can email our office, and you can also be in touch with the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security. With that, I thank you very much for the opportunity to be with you this afternoon, and I look forward to your questions, and I look forward even more to Joe Kerrigan's presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney General. That was great information, and we are very fortunate in Maryland to have your office to help protect us. At this time, I'd like to turn this over to Joseph Kerrigan. And Joe, I'm going to stop sharing so that you can share your screen. Joe, are you able to share your screen? All right. We have Joe's screen. Let me see if I need to do something to get Joe unmuted. All right, everybody can just hang on 1 minute.
All right. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. If everybody could please put themselves on mute.
All right.
So I am mute everybody.
The webinar is like a
Okay, now let me. Sorry everyone for the confusion. I'm going to find Joe and unmute him. Okay, Joe, did that
Okay.
work?
Did it work? Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Excellent. Great. One of these days, we're going to get a audio visual remote communication down. It's been, 30 years. This has been a problem. It'll work one day, I think. All right. So my name is Joe Kerrigan. I'm with the Johns Hopkins University Information Security Institute, and I'm going to follow up with what the Attorney General talked about today. And I'm going to give you more of a cybersecurity look at what's going on here. If you were to ask me 10 years ago why people are cyber criminals or hackers or whatever you want to call them, why they do what they do, I would have given you a long list of reasons. Political ideology, gain notoriety amongst their peers, for the fun of it, and down at the bottom would have been money, right? But now there is only one reason that these people act this way and behave this way, and it's for the money, and it is very profitable, as we're going to see a little bit later. So why is it so successful? Over time, these barriers to entries for these malicious actors have been lowered significantly. Anybody can do this. These techniques have been developed and distributed. The idea of talking your way into things, we call it social engineering in the field. And there's all kinds of literature out there about how to do it and how to make it happen and how to make it work. Additionally, the tools that we see these guys using have been commoditized, and they sell these to each other. The Attorney General was talking about a phishing email he got. Chances are that was somebody who is low skilled, who purchased some kind of kit that allowed that to happen, allowed him to do that. So who does it? Basically anybody who wants to. Like I said, there are no barriers to this anymore. You do not need to be an elite hacker in order to make money at this anymore. Anybody that has a desire and enough moral flexibility to do it can do it. And who do they target? And this is really what I want to focus on right here. They target anyone with any amount of money, and they target anyone with any amount of data. I used to have a hard time convincing people of this. I don't know that I do anymore, but I'd say you've got to start practicing some basic cybersecurity hygiene. And people would say, well, hackers aren't interested in me. I don't have a lot of stuff that's valuable to them. And that used to be a lot harder for me to convince people that that's not the case. And now I say, do you have $20 in your bank account or on a gift card or something? Hackers are interested in you for that money. Do you have any amount of data? Do you have a birth date? Do you have a name? Do you have a social security number? Of course, everybody has that. Hackers are interested in that. That's why it's important to understand that this applies to everybody. It doesn't just apply to people with a lot of money. It's especially true because it's the vast majority of people don't have a lot of money, but now they are all targets, right? So the cybercrime economy. Bromium released a study in 2008. They've since been acquired by HP. And they estimated that the cybercrime economy is $1.5 trillion. 1.5 trillion. Now that is bigger than all but about a dozen countries in their GDP. So if you want to think of the cybercrime marketplace as its own country, it's got like the 13th largest economy in the world, which is, I think that's impressive. This number includes $160 billion market in data trading. And this is where your data goes to be bought and sold on the dark web or on carding forums or things of that nature. People are looking for what they call fulls, F-U-L-Z. And that's just a complete record of an individual that allows a malicious actor to go out and create bank accounts and credit cards in their names. And this is the kind of marketplace you're looking at. This information does not include any data on scams, and there's a number of reasons for that. But it's hard to collect the data because, as the Attorney General said, they get a lot of calls in to their call center, but there are a lot of calls they don't get because a lot of these scams go unreported. They target everyone. And here's some interesting facts about what they target. This came from an FTC report from last year, I believe, 2018 to 2019, generally younger people are more likely to fall for a scam, which I found was surprising. I thought that that older people would be more likely to fall for a scam, but I find that as I get older, I'm less likely to believe what people tell me. So I think that has a lot to do with it. However, when older people are successfully targeted for a scam, they tend to lose a lot more money. And that makes sense as well, because older people tend to have more money than younger people. So here's a recent example of a campaign that was run by some scammers. And it comes from Sophos and Cybertrace. Sophos is a cybersecurity company. I'm not sorry, not Cybertrace, Cyphertrace. Cyphertrace is a cryptocurrency tracking company. They do a lot of work with banks to make sure that the banks are abiding by anti-money laundering laws with regard to cryptocurrency. All right. And this campaign was tracked from September through the end of January of last year, or this year, September last year to January of this year. And these spam messages comprised about 4 to 20% of the daily spam on the internet. So this was a massive campaign, right? A lot of spam was going out about this. A sextortion campaign, I won't go into the gory details of it, but it's basically somebody sends you an email, they give you a little bit of evidence like a password, and then they say, send me money or I'm going to disclose some embarrassing information to people about you. The emails were crafted to get through spam filters, very cleverly crafted. And the scammers collected around about 51 Bitcoin, which Sophos estimates and Cyphertrace estimate was worth almost $500,000. And this was from one campaign. Now, this is considered to be a small payout for a cyber campaign. When we see a lot of these other attacks, we see ransomware attacks that net millions of dollars over a shorter period of time. This is considered small potatoes, but this required very little hacking skills, right? It didn't require anybody to break into somebody else's computer to exploit them. All they needed to do was get a little bit of information associated with an email address and send out millions and millions of messages. This was very cheap and easy to do. It did not cost these guys a lot of money to do it, and they made a very large profit on it. So it's important that you understand your risk. What should you be worried about? And one of the things I tell people is don't be worried about people hacking into your computer. That's not really what your risk profile is. If you keep your software up to date, that's generally pretty hard to do. People with the real hacking skills that can break through your cable provider or internet provider's router that has some security settings on it, and then get through anything you have behind that and then violate the security of your actual computer, those people are few and far between, and they're generally busy with other tasks, and they don't waste their time on individuals. It's the people with the low level skills that are out there that you need to worry about, because they're plentiful and they're looking for things to do, right? And because they're not all that great, because they're not elite, as we say, they will need your help to hurt you. And what they will do is they will ask for it. But of course, when they ask for it, they're not going to tell you the truth about it. They're going to lie about it. They're going to say some other thing that makes you think you're doing something in your own interest. And that's where these guys do the most harm. So the far more likely scenario and risk for you is not that somebody's going to break into your computer, but that you're going to get targeted by a scammer, because your information is probably already out there in these large data collections and these large data sets. And this information is actually surprisingly robust. It contains email addresses and password pairs. It may even contain your name, your date of birth, your social security number. The Equifax breach that happened a couple of years ago is still out there and being traded. That information is still valid for a lot of people, even though that happened 2 years ago. As this information ages, it becomes less valuable, but it still does retain some value. And remember that you are just a phone call, an email, or a text message away from these people. It's interesting that about email, it's one of the only computer services that anybody can use your version of that service, without asking you for it. It is very much like a telephone. They can just send a message to you, and your email server will receive it and put it in your inbox. So the Attorney General already talked about a lot of these COVID-related scams. Impersonating government websites, malicious software designed as a coronavirus map. We saw this. Actually, this was a malicious application on your phone impersonating the Johns Hopkins website that's tracking the coronavirus, but it was actually on the back end malicious software. Fleeceware apps. These are something that are relatively new, and we're seeing a lot of this, and we're seeing it centered around COVID-19 as well. Fleeceware is kind of a new term. It's not really violating the terms of service of like the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store, but what it is, it has in-app purchases. And in the case of these in-app purchases for the COVID-19 apps that we're seeing, SpyCloud identified one app that was charging $100 a month for information that was publicly available. The app companies, Apple and Google, say they're working on this, trying to get these guys out of their marketplace, but I'm dubious of that claim because they collect a 30% cut of the revenue for in-app purchases. They're not financially motivated to remove these apps from the store. So your best defense here is just to be aware of what's going on and avoid fleeceware apps altogether. Another big risk that they're seeing in this report is recruiting laid off workers as money mules. The Attorney General touched on this looking for employment scams, but there's a real risk for unemployed people to be pulled into money muling scams. When people generate a lot of illegal revenue, they have to launder it somehow. And one of the ways they do that is use unsuspecting people to move money through their bank accounts. Depending on how this goes down, people who are party to this can be held criminally responsible for this. So be careful. Whenever anybody says, "I got a job offer for you," here's the first thing you need to do is deposit this $1,500 check in, and then you're going to send $200 to this guy to buy this software, $200 to this guy to buy this, whatever it is. Chances are that's a money muling operation. Just stay away from that. No good can come of it. Request for funding. We've seen a lot of requests for funding, unsolicited COVID-19 information. Actually, I do want to go back to the unsolicited COVID-19 information. If you get any email that has COVID-19 information that you haven't asked for, chances are that email is malicious. It may contain bad links or it may contain bad attachments. Avoid it. Fake vaccines. We've already talked about this. Fake preventative products. Fake cures. Worst, this actually was happening in Kentucky. There were people setting up fake COVID-19 testing sites where they were charging $240 for a COVID-19 test, or they were collecting your Medicare or Medicaid information, which they can use for fraud. It's terrible. They also were not practicing proper hygiene at these testing sites. So they may actually be spreading COVID-19 here. And this actually happened in the UK. A person showed up at a woman's house and demanded entry, pretending to be from the government, that he was going to come in and inspect, make sure she was compliant with all the UK COVID-19 regulations, and demanded that she pay £400 because she was in violation. This was a scam, total scam. And fortunately, she didn't have any money with her when this guy showed up. So the guy left empty-handed. But this is the kind of scary stuff that keeps me up at night. Just going door to door, exploiting people who are afraid and vulnerable. So what are they after? The number one thing they're after is money. The number two thing they're after is money. They're also after some personally identifiable information. There's a huge market for that stuff. So of course they sell it, and that's money. They are looking for your username, your password, name, address, telephone number, date of birth, social security number. Every piece of information associated with you is valuable to these guys. They're also looking for control of your computer for numerous reasons, but mostly because they can sell it money, or they can use it for crypto mining, which is mining cryptocurrency is no longer cost effective unless you can get the electricity for free. And if I can convince you to install some software on your computer that mines cryptocurrency for me, then I have just changed the entire economic proposition, and all my cryptocurrency comes to me for free. So here's what you should look for. Phishing is of some kind of fraudulent email that's sent to you. This is the first kinetic action in 90% of attacks. Phishing is how they get in. It's how they got into Baltimore, and it's how they get into just about every ransomware attack that you'll ever see. It is a phishing email. So somebody will send an email, some unsuspecting person or employee will open that email and let the will open the email and open the attachment associated with that email. That email attachment is malicious, and you're off to the races. Phishing is getting very sophisticated. As I mentioned earlier, they're finding ways to get through the filters that generally stop these emails. But the person is the ultimate screen, if you will. Phishing, which is a technical term I'm not too fond of, but it's essentially voice phishing, fraudulent phone calls. And the Attorney General touched on this earlier. They can spoof a number. We had Krebs on Security had a great article about somebody last week in a very complicated phishing scam where they were trying to compromise someone's two-factor authentication process, which they actually successfully did during the course of the scam. Fortunately, the guy realized it was a scam before anything could be done. But two things about this is that the phone call will always be of an urgent nature, right? You'll hear something that, here's something you need to worry about right now. And then they'll give you a call to action. And this is a psychological trick. This is how this works. When they tell you something that's bad and makes you think that it's urgent, that immediately stops you from critically thinking about things, because what they're going to present you with now is the solution to the problem they just presented. So that's how this works, is you're going to see an urgent message, something that's scary and big and terrifying. And then they're going to say, but here's how you can take care of it. And this is a common factor in a lot of these scams. So smishing is fraudulent text messages. Like I said, your information's out there, your phone number is out there as well. And people can send you malicious links and through just by sending you a text message or sending it through another messaging app like Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp. Here's one of the issues about this is that you don't have the same screen real estate on a phone that you have on your computer. So you may not even know that you're on a phishing site when you get this message. You also may not see the full text of the link. It's one of the technical issues. So to heighten your awareness, be suspicious of everything you receive, especially around COVID-19. And not just COVID-19, but whatever the next crisis is, because there's going to be something else that happens in 6 months after this. Whatever that is, whenever you start seeing unsolicited email on that, I want you to think, this is probably a scam. Okay, I didn't ask for this. I don't know why I'm receiving it. Probably a scam. Don't click on links that are sent to you, ever. Okay? When you receive an email from your bank saying that your credentials have been compromised, or we see some suspicious activity on your account, don't click on the link. Go to the bank website that you know is right. Type it in manually. Go to Google and search for it. Just make sure you're not clicking on an ad result, because that's one of the things that Google's not very good at. All right. Be aware of any urgent call to action. Because this is so common, it's a good red flag to watch for. Anybody that says, hey, you got to take care of this right now, that you've never heard from before, that's probably a scam. Don't install any software you didn't ask for, ever. Be aware of suspicious payment forms. No legitimate business takes payment in gift cards other than the company, like Amazon takes payment in Amazon gift cards. The federal government does not take payment in Amazon or iTunes gift cards, right? If you see a suspicious way of paying Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency, that should be a red flag. All right. Check on those who are more vulnerable. Talk to people who might not be tech savvy, people you know that might need to have this information. Spread the information around. It's good to spread it around. So some basic cyber hygiene practices. This will help keep you safe. Use multi-factor authentication on every site that offers it. This is some other way of verifying you are who you are. There are a number of ways to go into it, from the simple text message, which is actually the least secure way to do it. It can be compromised, but it's better than nothing, far better than nothing. And then all the way up to using a hardware token to get into a site. And there are a number of those. We can talk offline about that. Practice some good password hygiene. And I have a list of things here to do, like use long and complex passwords, don't reuse passwords, and change important passwords periodically. All that is made much easier with the use of a password manager. So I recommend using a password manager. And there are a couple of good free ones out there. Make sure all communication is outbound as much as possible. And this is a big one, especially for phone calls. If you get a phone call in from anybody, it is perfectly acceptable for you to say, I'm going to call you right back. Okay. And then to call that person back. You get somebody saying, hey, you owe X amount of dollars to this thing. I'm going to call you back. Give me, whoever you are, I'm going to call you back. No outbound information on inbound phone calls, because even the phone numbers can be spoofed to show up in your caller ID as if it's the organization that you think you're talking to. So always call them back, and they should always be receptive to being called back. And when they say, call us back, don't use the phone number that they give you, because if they give you the phone number, then chances are you're just talking to the same scammer again. Okay. You could be talking to the same scammer again. Don't use free Wi-Fi. That's never a good idea. And keep your software up to date. And I'm going to do a shameless plug here. Our Hacking Humans podcast is actually a social engineering podcast. It's designed not to be a technical podcast, but it keeps people abreast of the of all the scams that are going on out there, and it gives you a good idea of what to look for. It's, like I said, it's not technical, and I've heard from a number of people that their paranoia level has increased, but I like to think that their skepticism has increased. And with that, I think I will turn it back over to Sue.
Thanks very much, Joe. That was a lot of great information. All right, everybody, go ahead and put your questions in the chat box. We've got some, so we're going to get started with it, but please feel free to put more questions in there and we will get to them. So Joe, some of the questions have been, can you sort of expand a little bit on the Fleeceware app? Like, what is that, and what can people do? Right.
A Fleeceware app is it's actually, a lot of times they're legitimate apps. They go through these developers write this app, and then they put it into either the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store. And they pass all the security checks because they're actually not doing anything malicious. But then when you want to use the app, it might say you're signing up for a free trial, and you have 1 week or 3 days of free services. And after that time, they begin billing your Apple account or your Google account for the fee that they're charging, which can be exorbitant. This is not an illegitimate behavior. There are plenty of apps out there that do this legitimately. A Fleeceware app is one that charges either exorbitantly high fees or offers little to no services that aren't available for free for money. Does that clear it up?
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's great. Another question came in about the multi-factor authentication. Can you explain that a little more in depth, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically there are 3 kinds of multi-factor authentication. And I don't know how I can do this not in person, but one of them is the SMS message. This is where you sign up for a website, and then you say, whenever you log in, go ahead and send me a text message with a code, and then I'll enter that code. That is a lot better than no multi-factor authentication, but it is not the most secure. There was an article in Krebs on Security last week about a guy who was victimized by that and actually wound up, I think I talked about this in my talk, he gave up his 2-factor authentication code to some scammers who were in the process of trying to wire money out of his account. Don't use that if you can use a different version, but the next 2 versions are some kind of time-based password code. And there are 2 kinds of this. There's an authenticator app like Google Authenticator, or Microsoft has one. And then there is actually a hardware token, or not a hardware token, a little piece of hardware that has just numbers on it. You've seen these. They used to be the RSA tokens. And these are more secure than using an SMS message, but they can still be socially engineered for the code. So there's a risk there. And then finally, there is a hardware token like a YubiKey or the Google Titan product. That is a piece of hardware that you possess that you plug into your machine and you activate it at a certain time, and it issues a challenge response that verifies that the person in possession of this key, this hardware token. And that's probably the most secure one. So if you have websites that use that, then you should activate that. But I would recommend buy 2 of them, because if you only and register both of them with all these services, because if you buy one and that thing fails or you lose it, you're going to have to go through the process of getting access to all your accounts again, and that's kind of difficult.
Gotcha. Thank you for that.
Sure.
Let's talk a little bit about passwords. And you mentioned the need to have strong passwords. One thing I will share, I learned at a Google conference, for those of us who may have difficulty in remembering passwords, was to create a sentence. So like, I see it as raining today, and then use the first letter of each word in that sentence. And then of course, add some special characters and numbers and be able to create the password that way. But you also mentioned password managers. And
Right.
you mentioned some free ones.
Password managers are a better solution, I think. The problem with humans, is that we're not really good at creating randomness. And we are very good at creating easily guessable passwords. So those can be brute force, which is just a way of making many, many guesses to try to get access to something. And there's a number of different ways that's done, either directly on the website or by gaining access to the back end and then extracting what are called password hashes, which are, you can think of them as encrypted versions of your password. But if I start guessing at the password, I can usually find a matching hash, and then I can log in as you. So what I like to do is use a password manager. I use one called Password Safe, which is the only drawback is it's not really intuitive to use until you get into the workflow of it. There are a couple of other ones. Consumer Reports had a good article about password managers recently, and they even had a recommended one that had pretty good ease of use, but I can't remember off the top of my head what it was, but it's fairly recent. So if you go to Consumer Reports and look at their password manager review, you should be able to see it. But anyway, one of the strengths about a password manager is you can pick, or you can tell your password manager, I just want random 20-character passwords for my passwords. All my passwords are random 20-word characters. So if you were to ask me what my Facebook password is, I have absolutely no idea what it is. I'll tell you it's a string of characters that include lowercase, uppercase, numbers, special symbols, but I don't know what it is. I just copy it out of my password manager and paste it into the login page on Facebook. And when I have time to change the password, or when it comes time to change the password, I have a workflow for that I do. And a lot of these web-based password managers, like the ones that you pay for, like OnePass or LastPass and 1Password, I think that's what they're called. They make it a lot easier to change the password.
Gotcha. Thanks for that. Another question that came in, or a discussion to talk about, is free Wi-Fi. And a lot of people in today's world may not have internet in their home, or they're not in their office anymore, and so that they may be going to places where free Wi-Fi is available. And so
Right.
we talk a little bit about the use of that.
Yeah. So the question is the problem really is that you're not in control of that access point. Somebody else is. And additionally, it's very easy to create an access point that looks just like the one you want to connect to, but isn't the one you want to connect to. Additionally, you're not in control of the security policies, even if you are connecting to the actual legitimate Wi-Fi at, like, say, a Starbucks. You're not in control of the security policies, and you're on the network with a bunch of other people who may very well be able to see your computer right from that point. They may be able to intercept your traffic, and they may be able to see what you're doing on the network. They may be able to pick up passwords and usernames. Generally, that is encrypted with a much stronger way of encryption, but it's through what's called TLS. So that's kind of a lower risk, but they're still seeing what's going on, and they still have access to your physical network device on your computer, like your network card, your Wi-Fi card. Additionally, if you do have to access through a free Wi-Fi, there is a service available called a VPN, a virtual private network, that will make sure that all the internet traffic that goes out of your device is encrypted and in a tunnel. So they don't, all they see is that you're communicating with a VPN, and they really can't even tell what websites you're going to, and they can't access your computer directly because they don't have access to that VPN. So there's a mitigation for it.
Great, thank you. That's really helpful. So another area to talk about is cell phones. So again, a lot of people may not have access to a laptop or a computer at home, and they're really just getting everything on their cell phone. How
Right.
can they, stay safe by using their cell phone?
That's a big human factors problem, isn't it? My wife was just saying to me this morning that she has used her laptop recently for the past week or 2 weeks more than she's almost ever used it, because she does almost all of her, what we would consider computer using, on her cell phone. And this is common among people. There is a big problem here in that the size, the form factor of a cell phone doesn't give you the same information that's available when you're on a desktop or a laptop computer. Like, for example, when you open up a web browser on your phone, you don't really see the address bar, right? As you scroll, the address bar disappears and you don't even know where you are, right? You can scroll back up to the top and kind of look at the address bar, but you have to actively do that. It's not there all the time. Additionally, when you get a link, say, particularly through Twitter or through maybe through Facebook Messenger, but I know through Twitter, when you put a link on Twitter, they actually shorten that link down. So they give you a Twitter link that redirects to another link. And there's a service out there called Bitly that does the same thing. It gives you a really short link so that you can send this to people. And that's a real threat vector right there, because you don't know where it's going. Now, there are ways that you can see what's going on with it. Like, for example, if you take a Bitly link, put it in your browser address bar, and then put a plus sign after it, it won't redirect you. It will just show you what it's pointing to. It'll give you all the information about the link. But you have to know what that interface is for all of these different link shortening services. If you press and hold on a link in some interfaces, it will show you where it's going. Generally, I say never click on the links. If somebody sends you a link to something, don't click on it. Go directly to that company's website or use their app. There's another interesting phenomenon we're seeing, is that people are writing web pages that look almost exactly like apps. So when you click on a link in a text message, it loads up what looks exactly to you like your Bank of America app. It's not the Bank of America app. It's just a web page. And if you enter your username and password, you've just given up your username and password to malicious actors to your Bank of America account, which is really, really bad. Of course, everybody can understand why. But what I say, the best thing you can do is never click on the links that are sent to you. Just never do it. Directly access those services or websites or apps from the normal way you access it.
Yeah, that's a really good, important information. And for anybody who might be composing an email to a colleague or a friend, please don't ever compose it with, "I thought you might be interested in this," and then have the link, because I had that happen last week. I was like, there's no way I'm clicking on that thing.
Right.
It was a legitimate email from a colleague saying, "I actually think you'd be interested in the article." I'm like, yeah, you need to word it a little differently, because I will not click on it that way.
Right. Yeah. You reference a conversation. Hey, I remember when you mentioned to me that you were interested in whatever the article's about. Here's an article about it from this website.
Right.
Yeah. And of course, if you are suspicious of that kind of thing, you can always pick up the phone and call the person that sent it to you and, "Hey, did you send me this link?"
Yeah.
And validate it that way. Another interesting thing that happened to me one time is I have to, from part of my job description, is I have to disclose vulnerabilities. And I had some students who found a vulnerability in something, and I had to notify the company that they had a vulnerability. So I sent a couple of emails and left a couple of messages with the person, and I never heard back from them. And then I said, "Okay, fine. I'm just going to send you an email that has the disclosure documents in it, and we consider it disclosed at this point." And then he called me back. He said, "Oh, okay. I thought this was a scam. I thought someone was trying to penetrate my network." And I'm like, "I can't blame you for that." you know, I completely understand it.
Yeah, always err on the side of caution, right?
Right. Absolutely.
And for those nonprofit partners that are on this webinar, if you ever get an email from your boss, which I did one time, that was asking me to transfer money to a bank account, number one, your boss is never going to do that, and don't ever do that kind of activity
Right.
with your
Yeah,
boss.
that's called a business email compromise scam, and those have gotten very, very sophisticated. What we used to see was people just sending an email from a Google account that kind of looked like it was from the person, and we still see this actually. I actually got one from my boss, Tony DeBora, someone pretending to be Tony DeBora, and they might start off with, "Hey, are you busy?" A very short email. But we've also seen where they have compromised the email server of a company, and they are in the email conversation and they are waiting for the discussion about a money transfer to take place. And at that point in time, they inject themselves into the conversation and change banking credentials to route money to other places. And it can be devastating. There was a university in Canada that had, I think, $1.5 million in construction payments rerouted this way.
Oh my. Boy, you have to be vigilant, that's for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah,
I think
that is always worth the phone call. You know, if somebody says, "Hey, here's my new banking information," that's a phone call. You know,
yes.
that's something you need to pick up the phone and call, and you don't do anything until you get confirmation.
Very, very important. Thank you very much. All right, I think we have time for maybe two quick questions. One of them is, what about the use of hotspots?
Of like when you say hotspots, you're talking about your Wi-Fi hotspots on your phones?
Yeah,
Or
I think either
a
making
hotspot?
phone a hotspot or using a hotspot to get internet, while everybody's working from home, perhaps.
Yeah, that's fine. You know, I have a hotspot service on my cell phone, and I use that frequently. I will use that before I connect to a hotel's Wi-Fi. So I actually prefer a Wi-Fi hotspot that you pay for. If you pay for it, you're not the product, you're the customer.
Gotcha. Okay. And then one last question is, a lot of children are learning online right now. So they're spending a lot more time using internet and accessing different browsers and content and everything. What's a quick word of advice for those who are working with children to kind of protect them and have them start thinking about being careful online?
Yeah. People, these children might be getting online before their parents want them to get online. Because you don't think of kindergartners as somebody that needs to use online services, but now they are, right? I guess there are software solutions out there that help protect children from these kind of things. I think the best thing is just for the parents to be nearby when the children are using the computer. Keep the computer in a public space in the house. Check it out, see what they're doing, look over their shoulders, make sure they're not talking to anybody they shouldn't be talking to. That's a big risk. I've seen some I won't go into it, but I've seen some really disturbing reports out there about how quickly that happens, how quickly children are targeted. It is almost instantaneous. So if your kid is supposed to be on a learning platform and they deviate off to another platform that might be of interest to them, that's a risk factor. If they let somebody know that they're a kid, and there's somebody out there watching, the attraction is the kinetic actions are not really kinetic actions, but the disturbing things start happening very quickly.
Right. So good advice. Be in the room with them so you can
Yep.
see what they're accessing. Absolutely. Well, Joe, thank you so much for taking your time and joining us today to share this great information. Thank you, Mr. Attorney General. Thank everyone for participating. Really appreciate you being here. Hope that you will share this information with family and friends to protect them all. Really appreciate the Cybersecurity Council for co-sponsoring this webinar. This webinar is recorded. It will be posted on Cash Academy coming up in a few days. Please check out other webinars on the Cash Academy's website, as well as our resources that are available and different topics that relate specifically to lessening the financial impact of this crisis. We now have those pages in Spanish as well. So thanks everyone. Please stay safe and have a great rest of your day.